Prague off the beaten track, Vít Bohanka takes you away from the crowds to the city's hidden gems.
Karlovo náměstí.
So, I'm getting off the B or yellow metro line at Karlovo náměstí. But if I want to take you to Podskalí, this charming part of Prague, it's better not to go to Karlovo náměstí, but to use the Palackého náměstí exit, which you can see actually on the signs, and it will help you. So if you want to go to Podskalí, go to Palackého náměstí. The escalator and then traditional staircase brought me up to the street, or in this case rather square level. And probably the first thing that you'll notice is the rather complex monument of František Palacký. The official information says it is a multi-figure sculpture which represents an allegory of the genius of history and the voices of history to which František Palacký listens. At the top stands a female figure that is a symbol of Czechia and also symbol of the resurrection of the nation, with flowing garments and uplifted left hand and her right arm embracing a young man dressed in a kind of folk costume. She is accompanied by another female figure and three flying figures of genii, two female and one male figure with hands cupped around his mouth. And František Palacký himself sits under this statue. And just in case you haven't heard of him, he was a 19th century historian and politician and a massive figure in the Czech revivalist movement that did all it could to raise the national spirit, culture and language, and finally culminated in the foundation of independent Czechoslovakia. And even though Palacký didn't live to see that day, he died in 1876, if I count correctly, nearly half a century before independent Czechoslovakia was born. He was still considered, and is considered, I think, the proverbial father of the nation. And his monument marks something like an entry to Podskalí, which literally translated means under the rock, because nearby is the Vyšehrad Rock, upon which the ancient Vyšehrad, or upper castle, stood. So Podskalí was an area or a village under that rock, where something like the first and main cargo port on the Vltava River, or the Moldau, was situated since ancient times, and definitely in the Middle Ages. So this is where wood, sand, stone and other bulk resources were transported to be loaded on carts and carriages or wagons to be sent to customers further in the city. Unfortunately, at least from my point of view, unfortunately, these days you can't see any marks of what life was like in this undoubtedly bustling and very lively and busy port village of Podskalí, because nearly the whole area was demolished and redeveloped at about the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. A new embankment was constructed with Náplavka, where I will take you in a minute. But right now I'm going around the kind of modernist building of the Health Ministry of Czechia to the Church of Virgin Mary and Slavonic patrons, especially Cyril and Methodius. Now, if you find yourself in this part of Prague, you really can't miss the twin modern gilded spires, very well visible if you are, for example, taking a boat trip on the Vltava. And it is a part of the Emmaus Benedictine Monastery, or Na Slovanech Monastery, as the Czechs sometimes call it. The Benedictines were invited here by Charles IV in the 14th century. The monastery and its church were heavily damaged during an Allied bomb raid in February 1945, when American bombers probably mistook Prague for Dresden and unloaded some 150 tons of explosives on the city, killing some 700 people. So the monastery was especially heavily hit and the church was damaged beyond repair. The structure that I can see today was actually built in the 1960s, or at least it was finished in the 1960s. And right now it is Sunday and I would like to see whether it's open, whether I can go inside. So I did get to the Virgin Mary Church of Emmaus Monastery. Unfortunately, it is closed, even though it's Sunday. And it says that masses are held here every day at 10 o'clock in the morning and at 17:30, meaning 5:30 in the afternoon. So I suppose if you really wanted to go inside, you could come for the Mass. It was actually quite a walk here, even though it's quite close to the Palackého Square. I had to walk around. It's not accessible in the direction from the river. But there's a beautiful kind of little square or large patio. I don't know what you would call it. But there's a nice view of the Vltava River. And you can also see the Strahov hill. So it was worth it. Even though the church itself is right now closed. But I can enjoy it even from the outside because it is a piece of architecture that's very difficult to overlook. And if you want, you can check the web pages of Radio Prague International, where I will be posting the photographs that I took here. So you can check it there. Now I came to the entrance of the Emmaus Monastery, and obviously you can visit it. They do visits, but it's closed again. It's off season. And normally between May and October, it's open from Monday till Saturday, from 11 to 5 in the afternoon. But now in winter, from November till April, it's open from 11 to 4 p.m. but only on weekdays, not on weekends. The admission is just, the basic admission is 90 crowns for kids, and for seniors it's over 60. It's 60 crowns, so it's not really expensive, but unfortunately I have bad luck, so I'm not going to see the Emmaus Monastery, but that's okay. So I went down from the Emmaus Monastery closer to the river again. I'm right now in the Ladova Street. Ladova Street because Josef Lada, the national artist, painter, illustrator, lived here between 1925 and 1957. I'm actually standing in front of the house where he has a plaque. And tragically, his daughter died during the air raid by American bombers that I mentioned in 1945. Lada, I don't know, you can Google him. He's an author of illustrations, for example, to Good Soldier Švejk by Jaroslav Hašek. But especially, he's an illustrator of many children's books. He also wrote a book about a little tomcat, Kocourek Mikeš, that is still, I believe, very, very popular. And it's a kind of part of Czech, I would say, folklore, even though he was a painter in his own right, of course. He wasn't just a folk painter without name. What is also interesting, in this street, in Ladova Street, it was a home of Professor Jaroslav Hejrovský, the first Czech Nobel Prize laureate, the founder of polarography. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. This whole area, as I mentioned, was actually redeveloped at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. And it's kind of dominated by two ministries. There's the Ministry of Health that I mentioned at Palackého náměstí. But right here, I'm coming closer now to the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs. It's not that, it's very significant for visitors of the city, but these are kind of majestic buildings that were built, I think, here in the first part of the 20th century already. Right now, it's kind of calm here. It's Sunday. There's not much going on, I have to say, not much action. So right now I'm going to another place where I hope to find out more about the past of this place that used to be very, very lively indeed, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to the old customs house where there is the museum of Podskalí, and indeed I'm actually going down the Podskalská street, which is technically speaking, this whole area is actually technically speaking still part of Prague too, as well as, for example, Vyšehrady, the place where the Czech radio has its headquarters. I am now standing at Nahrobci Square, right next to a charming little children's playground. In front of me is the old customs house, a building that once played really a central role in the life of Podskalí. It gave this particular location its name výtoň, because the customs duties were collected on timber through a process known in Czech as vytínání, or cutting. And from that came výtoň, vytínat výtoň. It literally means, that they cut out some of the timbers from the rafts that were flowing down the river, and that was the customs that they paid to the city. Today there is a restaurant and, more importantly, the museum of Podskalí in the old customs house. And the museum kind of preserves the memory of this historic neighborhood, and that's where I'm heading right now. I've just stepped inside the Museum of Podskalí. Before I get into the details, let me mention that the museum is open only on weekends, so plan your visit accordingly in case you want to come here. It's part of the main museum of the city of Prague, and though it's small, I think it offers a really fascinating glimpse into the history of this area.
Tady je, jak se dělá vor, takový ty základní informace. Máme model, takže ten si můžete prozkoumat.
I spoke to a very kind lady here. She speaks some English, but is too shy to be recorded. So she explained the layout of the museum in Czech. The exposition is basically divided into three main sections. The first focuses on the tradition of rafts that used to bring wood, especially from southern Bohemia, down the Vltava River to Prague. The second part tells the story of a steamship cargo transport along the Vltava and Elbe rivers. For most of the 19th and 20th centuries, Prague was of course directly connected by steamships to cities like Dresden and all the way down to Hamburg along the Elbe River. Of course, with the development of rail and road transport, it kind of diminished in significance. And finally, there is a third section of the museum, which tells the story of Podskalí, which disappeared as it was developed in the end of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century. So a lot of photographs, very interesting facts. The museum may be small and kind of cozy, but it's really packed with history and charm. So if you're interested in the life and culture of Podskalí, it's definitely worth a visit. And one thing, important thing that I shouldn't forget to mention is the fact that it's bilingual. All the information is both in Czech and in English. So even if you don't speak Czech, you can learn a lot. I walked out of the old customs house and now I'm standing on Náplavka, the beautiful quayside of the Vltava River. And I would say one of the most popular places in Prague for walking, jogging or just relaxing. Prague's quayside altogether stretches for about 4 kilometers, but this part here in Podskalí is perhaps the most popular. It's lively, it's picturesque and it has a unique charm that draws both locals and visitors alike. Right in front of me there are several boats anchored along the quayside, and one of them is especially popular with families today because it has a little skating ring open for kids and they seem to be having a great time. It's a lovely reminder, I think, of how this river has always been an integral part of Prague's life from its history, both as a transport communication but also a place for leisure, sports and enjoyment. And if I look out on the calm water today, it's kind of hard to imagine now in January that the Vltava used to freeze over in winters, right up until the 1950s. Back then the river was often cold enough for people to play ice hockey on its surface. But that changed during the construction of a series of dams upstream from Prague, because these dams that were completed in the mid-20th century have warmed the river and made freezing quite a rare occurrence now. However, if you speak to older residents of the city, they might still share kind of their fond memories of skating or playing on the frozen river, a sight that feels like a distant past today, even though you can easily find photos on the internet when it was still so. So, standing here on Náplavka with its vibrant atmosphere and stunning views of the Vltava, it's easy to see why this place is such a favorite spot. It's not just a part of Prague's present. I think it really is a place that carries stories of its past as well. So I've now settled into one of the cozy little cafes here on Náplavka. What makes this place so unique is that these cafes are actually situated in the old vaults built into the embankment when it was constructed. Originally, these kind of vaults served as storerooms for materials that were transported along the Vltava River, but over time, as the importance of the river as a transportation route diminished, these spaces were abandoned. For much of the 1980s and 1990s, if I remember correctly, both the vaults and Náplavka itself fell into neglect. They were not very nice. But thankfully, they've been beautifully restored and repurposed in recent years. Today, these vaults house charming cafes like this one, or bars, as well as galleries, I think, and other small businesses, making Náplavka really a vibrant social hub for locals and visitors. Now, sitting here, sipping my coffee, I can't help but feel the energy of this place, a blend of the old and the new, of history and modern life. So, to sum it up, throughout this walk we've explored Podskalí, a part of Prague that's rich in stories, from the Emmaus Monastery, its church with striking gilded spires, to the old customs house and the museum of Podskalí, where the legacy of raftsmen, steamships and traditional river life is preserved. And then we walked along Náplavka, once a bustling port and now a beloved space for leisure. I think Podskalí may have transformed dramatically over the years, but it remains a testament to Prague's resilience and ability to adapt. It's really a place where history and community come together, a place that invites you to slow down, take in the river views and connect with the city's past while enjoying its present kind of vibrance, and energy. If you are interested how to get to Náplavka, you can check our web pages. There's some additional information, some photos as well. And I'm very much looking forward to taking you to the next place in Prague, off the beaten track, which is going to be the Nový Svět area, very close to the Hradčany, very close to the castle, and yet it's really off the beaten path or off the beaten track, and it's charming and worth visiting. So, until then, stay curious and naslyšenou.
Prague off the beaten track. Vyšehrad takes you away from the crowds to the city's hidden gems.